I've seen brands spend $50K in a month acquiring customers and they're generating $75K in revenue and they think they're profitable, but you look at the cohorts and realize that $15K of that revenue is from customers acquired 6 months ago. So actually your new customers are underwater and you're about to hit a cash wall. What is up, everybody? Today we're talking about customer lifetime value, LTV, baby, but probably not in the way that you've heard it before. So obviously, most content about LTV probably focuses more on like the sexy stuff, if you will. Email flows, loyalty programs, maybe some referral systems, all the tactics that promise to squeeze more money out of every customer. But probably analyzing hundreds of e-com P&Ls and running countless audits, I think I've realized most brands aren't thinking about this right. In fact, I say that they're probably thinking about this completely wrong, optimizing for the wrong things. They're forecasting unrealistically, and they're missing the actual levers that matter. So today, I want to break down 5 critical insights about LTV that I think will completely shift how you think about retention, acquisition, and what's actually possible with your business model. So without further ado, let's dive in. So insight number 1, which is, I don't know how much hope there would be for you, if at all, but if you aren't doing this, which is insight number 1, which is you need to measure with cohorts or you're flying blind. So there's not much hope for you if you haven't done a cohort model yet. But if you haven't, you need to do that. First things first, you need to track your customers through cohort analysis. Otherwise, you literally don't know what's happening in your business, transparently. Whether you have, aka strong cohorts or strong LTV, or you're assuming weak LTV, there's still an argument to be made by tracking your cohorts. So what I mean by that is you're tracking groups of customers by when they were acquired and measuring their behavior over time. So customers acquired in January, how did they repeat within that same month? So month 0. What did they do in February, March, 6 months later, a year later? And ultimately this matters because aggregate metrics lie to you. A lot of times within our forecast, people are saying, oh, well, I thought my repeat purchase rate was X. That might be because you have amazing retention from 2023, while 2024 are actually churning at a much higher clip. And you won't see that without analyzing specific cohorts. So the framework that we use at Kinship is we're tracking a cohort called repeat customers within the first 6 months. And then we track a different cohort by active non-recent repeat rate. So active meaning they've bought within the last 6 months, the non-recent meaning they were acquired more than 6 months ago. So we look at these specific windows, 2 different cohorts or 2 different sets of looking at repeat customers. One is obviously within the first 6 months, we're looking at a 6-month average because obviously that's most critical to cash flow. And then we're looking at cohorts that come back that were acquired more than 6 months ago. So what is the longevity of your LTV? And we're looking at those specific windows. They behave very differently, but predictably when we split these 2 different cohorts out, and they give you actionable decision-making timeframes. So you can't wait 5 years to know if your acquisition strategy worked, obviously, but you can look at 60 or 90-day cohorts and obviously make more real-time adjustments. And again, this is critical to you spending money today on customer acquisition, because if that revenue comes back to you over months or over years, and you don't understand your cohort curves, you have no idea if you can actually afford your current acquisition strategy. And the more you understand it, the more aggressive or less aggressive you need to be. So in brands in the sales cycle, I've seen brands spend $50K in a month acquiring customers and they're generating $75K in revenue and they think they're profitable. And that goes into other host of issues. But you also look at the cohorts and realize that maybe $15K of that revenue is from customers acquired 6 months ago. So actually your new customers are underwater and you're about to hit a cash wall. So again, the forecasting layer in this is that once you have historical cohort data, you can forecast forward with much more predictability and you can model that out into future months with reasonable confidence. And the repeat part of your business is obviously the most predictable part of your P&L, and especially the more mature that you are. You know, a brand launching 6 months ago, obviously less predictable. But years and years of data is very, very predictable. And it allows you to responsibly scale acquisition spend by forecasting the cash that you'll generate from cohorts over time and not just looking at the immediate new customer ROAS. So again, without this foundation, everything I'm about to tell you is completely meaningless. So you need, prior to stop this podcast and go do that. Otherwise, just don't even bother. So you got to get your cohort tracking set up first. Insight number 2, your customer value actually extends further than your data shows. So something that surprised me when I start really digging into long-term retention patterns is that customers actually keep coming back way longer than standard, what most people do, which is 90 days, even 12 months. Most brands focus on immediate repeat purchase rates. They'll say our 30-day repeat rate is 15%, or customers come back within 90 days or never. But actually, when you extend your analysis to a year or more, 18 months, 24 months, there's this long tail of customers who keep trickling back. And let's say you're looking at a cohort from January 2024. By April 2024, 90 days, you've generated 45% additional value beyond first purchase. So you might think that's your ceiling. But by January 2025, 12 months later, that same cohort is at 65% additional value. And by January 2026, they're at 85%. I know this is in the future by the time you're listening to this, but that long tail compounds significantly. So especially in categories where purchase frequency is naturally lower, maybe people only buy a few times per year, but ultimately they keep doing it for years, right? Like if you're in fashion category, or if you're in certain supplements that you only buy a couple times a year, you might see this pretty dramatically, that you find brands that you love, and then you keep coming back to them for years. Obviously with wellness and supplements, like you get into routines and you stick with them. Home goods, it's pretty infrequent, but high lifetime value. You build inherent trust over time with long sales cycles, but incredible retention once established. So the key here is, like, if you're only looking at 90 days or 90-day cohorts, you might think that your unit economics actually don't support scaling. But if you extend that view to 12 or 18 months, suddenly the math changes, right? And again, the more data that you have, the more life that you have in your brand, the more historicals that you have in your brand, the more predictable that opportunity is. And it creates opportunity to be more aggressive on acquisition. Obviously, if you have the cash position to support the payback period, you're essentially investing in an asset today that's going to generate returns for years. But again, I need to emphasize, you can only do this if you have, number one, lockdown. You need to have solid cohort forecasting and cash flow management. Otherwise, you're kind of just gambling. Insight number 3, retention is genetic to your business model. So the hard truth that nobody wants to hear, LTV is primarily determined by your product type and consumption patterns, not by your marketing tactics. I think I see this consistently in audits all the time. Brands come to me saying, hey, we need help with retention, and they want to implement more sophisticated email flows, loyalty programs, subscription mechanics. But ultimately, when I look at the P&L, look at the business fundamentals, I see that they're selling a product people only need once every 2 to 3 years, right? Like there's no amount of email that's going to change that. I'm sorry, that's just the reality. And then there's certain product types, right? Like they just have natural repeat purchase cycles, consumables, skincare, beauty, apparel, like furniture, right? Like they're very different sales cycles within all of these. And you can't necessarily market your way out of product's natural consumption rate. If customers don't need your product more frequently, they're not going to buy it more frequently. And so like I've audited a brand doing around 8 to 10 million. They have 20 to 25 year one retention, very, very low. The founder was convinced that they could fix it with better email sequences. Now, is that necessarily a bad idea? Not. Like, I'm always a fan of sending more emails. But up until that date, they're looking at auditing their sequences. Do you have referrals for great email marketers? Ultimately, they've done that. They've rebuilt the email strategy a couple times. They've tested subscription options. They created tier-based incentives. They optimized timing based on purchase behavior. And ultimately, because this brand became a client, they ultimately moved the needle from 23% to maybe 26%. And does that affect some of the forecasts? Sure. Not by much, though. And honestly, that could have just been noise in the data, because ultimately, my main point is that customers are buying a product they simply don't need to repeat frequently. The product category fundamentally is limited by LTV ceiling, and which brings up, why cross-selling is harder than you think. Like that's the other trap, right? The brands think that they can bring in customers on, a product like product A, hero SKU, weak retention, and then, hey, we'll cross-sell them into product B, which has great retention. We'll get them in the door with our starter pack and then convert them to our subscription line through nurture sequences. And I think that fails often more than it succeeds, because customers bought product A because they wanted product A. And so getting them to switch to something completely different requires overcoming massive psychological friction. And I think some cross-sell happens. Sure. Again, send the email, go for it. It's free advertising, but I don't think it's nowhere near enough to bank your entire business model on it. And I think that would be a huge gamble. And so what I think actually drives retention, again, after analyzing all of our clients, looking at a ton of P&Ls, what strongly correlates to strong LTV. Number one, and this isn't anything revolutionary, is the product quality and satisfaction of the product, right? Obvious, but true. Natural consumption cycle. You have built-in reasons to reorder. And then category expansion that makes sense, right? So if you have low LTV or not a subscription product, but you have category expansion that makes sense for the business, so adding products that customers naturally need, that makes a lot of sense. When you have brand loyalty from authentic connection, so people genuinely loving what you stand for, I think those 4 reasons. So just to recap, product quality, you have natural consumption cycle, right? Built-in reasons to reorder, natural product buying periods. You have, you expand product category that makes sense relative to your brand. And then ultimately you have brand loyalty from, creating community and people generally loving what you stand for. Notice what's not on that list. Sophisticated email automation, clever retention tactics, right? Those things can optimize, I think, at the margins. And if you have low LTV, you have 15, 20% LTV, you need to be doing those things. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, oh, don't waste your time on these things. Obviously, you need to have those blocking, tackling tactics in place. But I don't think they transform a fundamentally low LTV business into a high LTV one. That's just not going to happen. So a lot of this conversation is just resetting expectations, which brings me to insight number 4, the tactics that actually move the needle. So obviously I've been harping on this episode, telling you tactics that don't matter that much. But let me give you ones that do, and I think do have a measurable impact, even if they necessarily don't transform your business. Tactic number 1, increase communication volume. Not better emails, not more segmented emails, but just more emails, right? So if you're sending 2 emails per week, test 4. If you're at 4, test 6, 7, 8. Some of the data I've seen across dozens of brands is, yes, unsubscribe rates go up, but total revenue goes up more because your actual buyers want to hear from you more frequently than you think. I think you need to get out of the, I will annoy my customers. My open rates, my unsubscribe rates will go up. But the people who unsubscribe were unlikely to buy anyway. So you're actually just cleaning your list of dead weight. Now, the caveat is that you need enough product breadth and content to justify the frequency. If you have 5 SKUs and nothing new to say, this doesn't work. So that is the caveat to what I'm really pushing on you. But I think you need to just push more emails. Tactic number 2, this is a huge one, is create moments through product releases. So I think this is one of the most powerful levers that you can do, and it's definitely one I've seen from brands that can execute it. You don't create retention through evergreen automation running in the background. You create it through marketing moments, specific events that give customers reasons to re-engage. Obviously, Black Friday, Cyber Monday is a great example of this. See massive spike in cohort revenue during promotional periods because you created a moment. But the best brands do this year round through not just sales, but through product releases. So we have a brand doing this, Wildbird. They're creating color drops. That is another way that you can do that through limited drops. They're creating new color SKUs. They create hype around those new color SKUs. And actually what they see happen is that people just buy the best-selling products anyways. So it just creates lift every single month. So you can create limited drops. You can create new seasonal collections. You can create collabs with other brands or influencers. You can create, obviously, extensions from your product line. And each release brings previous customers back because there's something new to be excited about. Okay, tactic number 3, Obviously, you can optimize your post-purchase experience. I keep saying obviously, but what's obvious to me is not obvious to you. This is not going to save a bad product, but it can improve conversion of customers who are already going to come back. So obviously things that can matter are shipping speed, packaging quality, an easy reorder process, clear usage instructions. So you can think about it like this. If someone loves your product, but had a terrible delivery experience, they might not come back. So these operational details matter when you're talking about the margins of creating improvement on your retention. Tactic number 4, subscription where it actually fits. So, subscription is powerful because it automatically captures future value without requiring another purchase decision. That is really powerful. You want to remove friction as much as possible. Subscription just does this automatically. But, and this is critical, it only works for products with predictable consumption cycles, right? So great for subscription, like I've already talked about, supplements, skincare, pet food, coffee, meal kits. Bad for subscription, apparel, furniture, one-time use items, a sauna, infrequent purchases. So you can't just throw on subscription on your website and say, hey, I'm going to try to force subscription on people because it's trendy. It has to make natural sense for your product. And then insight number 5, I think you need to be honest about your business model viability, right? Like the final insight, and it's the hardest one, is sometimes the analyst in you reveals that you don't need to have a viable D2C business model with your current product. So I've had discovery calls where I look at someone's numbers and realize, okay, 50 to 60% cost of goods or cost of delivery. You have 20 to 25% year one or even 6-month LTV. Your CAC is 30 to 40% of your first purchase value. And then you have 15 to 20% operating expenses. At some point, like the math just doesn't work. Like there's no amount of optimization that fixes those fundamentals. So the hard conversation, and sometimes the right move, is completely redesigning the product to improve margins, number 1, and changing the business model, maybe retail instead of D2C. Like it's just not going to work. Maybe you can add high margin products to the mix. Maybe you accept just lower growth targets and building slowly. I think that's a huge one. And I'd much rather help someone realize this early than watch them burn through, $500,000 of learning it the hard way. On the flip side, some businesses have incredible fundamentals. They have, 60, 65, ideally 70% gross margins. They have 80, 100% is kind of the gold standard of, 6-month LTV to year one. They have reasonable CAC payback within 60 to 90 days. They have lean operations, sub 15%, ideally sub 10% of revenue. These businesses can scale aggressively because the unit economics support it. And they don't need necessarily fancy tactics. They just need to feed the machine with customers and creative, right? So you got to know which one you are, do the cohort analysis, calculate your true margins, forecast your cash, and then make an honest assessment of whether your business model can support the scale that you want. Because ultimately the worst outcome is spending years optimizing tactics that just barely move the needle when you should have been just fixing your overall strategy. So, all right, wrapping this up, here's what you need to remember. 1, measure your customer LTV through cohorts. 2, your customer value actually extends further than your short-term data probably shows. So that's why you need to look at the long tail, even beyond a year. 3, retention is genetic to your product type and consumption patterns. Tactics will optimize at margins, but will not transform your fundamentals, which leads to 4. The tactics that do work is what I went through, which is increase the email volume, just send more emails, create moments and product releases, optimize operations, and then use subscription if it makes sense for your business model. And then 5, ultimately, you just need to be brutally honest about whether your business model is viable for the scale that you want to achieve. Otherwise, you need to reset optimization or expectations and look in the mirror. So ultimately, I think the brands that win long-term are the ones who understand, their unit economics, they're doing the cohort analysis, they have realistic expectations, and have incredible focus on the few levers that actually matter. So again, if you want us to look and audit your business, not just your ad accounts, but your business from a P&L perspective, we look at your retention rates. We can look at your cohort data. We do this completely free. Just reach out on any platform. I love digging into this stuff. And as always, Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.